Calling this meeting to order. Please settle. Calling to order the meeting. This is the City Council meeting of Wednesday, July 26, 2023. Good evening, everybody. Glad you could be with us. Good evening, Council. Glad you're with us, too. Our first order of business will be to recite the Pledge of Allegiance, which is right behind me, I guess.
He thinks we should face that way, I'm told.
According to protocol.
We're going to call that one.
That's in Ohio.
We're going to call that one.
Yeah, that's the correct.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
One nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and
justice for all.
Just a reminder to council, you need to open your microphone so that the blue light is illuminated. Yes, we are going to do that. Roll call, please.
Mr. Knowles?
Here.
Ms. Acuff?
Here.
Ms. Weltman?
Here.
Mr. Gaga?
Here.
Mr. Lemay?
Here.
Mr. Gentili?
Here.
Dr. Wong?
Here.
All right. We have a number of items on our agenda this evening. The first is a motion to award the city's street striping program to Pat Flowers, Inc. in an amount not to exceed $38,293. This be Jim or Don who wants to take us through this? The floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. This is our regular yearly street striping program. Went out for bid. This was the low bidder, and he's done probably the last 3 or 4 years in a row. So he's pretty well versed with what how the city is and where all the spots are that need to get taken care of. We are getting a part of Shaker East in front of the Park Synagogue. They used to have a line in there, and when they did some repaving, we lost that line, so we're gonna get that put back in to get that lane back to the proper size and that Don had it planned out for originally. So, this contractor is $4,000 cheaper than the next one, so we only got 2 bids back in, so he's been historically the cheapest all along, so.
Are you disappointed with 2 bids only?
No, not really, because of, I think we're a little too small for the supersized crews.
Yeah.
You know, the ones that do Solon or all these larger areas, because we got very limited on the large turn lanes and arrows at the main intersections and stuff like that. We're very small, so no, I'm not surprised. It has to be a smaller operation.
And does the spread of that bid, it's 10% more, surprise you?
No,
4,000 higher?
no, that doesn't surprise me.
Historically, there've been some
Yeah,
shenanigans
I mean,
in this
the way
area.
they price it out, they price it by the streets.
Right.
And it seems like the bigger streets are where the lower bidder is a little higher and the top bidder is a little lower because of the way they do it. They come in with these big machines and they're there for less time. So the paint's all the same, it's the time that they spend on it.
Sure. All right.
Would there be, since we've used him for 3 to 4 years in a row, would there be an opportunity to save more money if we did like a 2-year plan with a contract and maybe it would attract more people or even bring his prices down and lock him in? Or is that not allowed?
I'm not sure because of the biggest disparity right in the last 2 years has been the price of latex paint because of all the shutdown and stuff. Latex paint went through the roof, and seeing there's only basically 1 or 2 places that make this paint, make the latex additive. Everybody's gotten these, so I don't know if they would really go along that route.
Anyone else? All right, can we have then a motion to award this bid?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Not hearing any. Roll call, please.
Mr. Knowles?
Yes.
Ms. Acuff?
Yes.
Ms. Weltman?
Yes.
Mr. Gaga?
Yes.
Mr. Lemay?
Yes.
Mr. Gentili?
Yes.
Dr. Wong?
Yes.
Okay, next, we discussed this a bit last week, and it was a suggestion that we should just prepare a more formal motion for approval by council this week, and this is a motion to authorize the engineer to begin his design and plans, specs, and bid documents for the Gates Mills multipurpose path, and to authorize the bidding of the project upon approval of the design by the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. I want to advise council, this is not to approve the landscape architect for the job. This is so that Don can formally start receiving, he's got to do his own work that he has to get paid for. We need to authorize and appropriate for that. And then Don, we need to be able to receive bids from landscape architects ultimately for the project. And Don, has his own work that he needs to kick off so far as the general design of the path so that the landscape architects know what they're designing around. So
We get ODNR approval of the grant? Did we get ODNR approval of the grant?
it's going to be probably another week or so, I understand, before it filters its way through all the different agencies of the state.
Should we make this, though, subject to that being received, just in case
Yeah, we
something
can make that
happens?
contingent upon
That's what it
receipt of
says,
that.
contingent on.
And then my other question is, so we will get a pass on the design of the path, though, just some review in
Of
addition
course.
to the
Yes,
landscape?
yes, you will. You will.
Because we might have, insight.
So I would add at the end of this, just 4 more words, "and by city council," in terms of approval of the design. So after natural resources, add "and by city council."
It'd be approval of the grant, and then
This is to kick it, I would suggest, Jim, instead we say that the motion is that it's contingent upon your
For that.
award of the Ohio
there's
Department of
two
Natural
changes.
Resources.
2 changes I'm proposing. One is subject to approval by the MDNR of the grant, number 1 change. Second change is that bidding and approved project approval upon the approval of the design of ODNR and city council.
Or would it be better,
I
Jim,
want
if
city
the city
council-
council approves it first, before it goes to ODNR for approval?
that-
That may be even better.
That'd be better.
Yeah, either way, I just want to make sure we have a pass at it.
I thought we were,
I think,
I'm going to let Don weigh in for a minute here.
if you don't mind, I think what you want to do is look at the plans and provide suggestions as we're doing the design. But once we send it to ODNR, if they approve it, then we can't really tinker with it.
Then we go the other way around then. So subject to approval by city council and by ODNR. That just comes first.
In that order.
Yeah, and that's fine.
Mayor, I suggested this, Don was saying that he couldn't start the work until we had that final approval by ODNR or whoever it is within the
Right.
state that does that. So what this is meant to do, what I intended to do by this, is to allow him to start the minute that we get
Right.
that approval. So this was just contingent on getting the final approval. Has nothing to do with anything other than just allowing him to get started.
Get started. I agree.
Well, especially because of how the timing would fall.
Right.
We don't have another
We
meeting.
won't have another meeting.
Right, and I think that was what drove it.
So let's just words right. So subject to approval of the ODNR grant.
Yeah, it should be grant
Yeah,
rather
grant,
than
grant.
design.
Yeah.
Grant by ODNR.
Grant by ODNR.
design should be
fine.
grant.
Grant by.
I'll give you that. And then at the end of
Let's
it,
take
and then I guess approval of the design by city council and by Ohio Department of Natural Resources.
Well, you could hold off, I mean, if what we're looking for right now is just the go-ahead for design, you could hold off approving bidding until such time as the design has been approved by council.
Maybe I'm not reading this right, but the word grant doesn't appear.
That's right.
That's the new amendment Jim
exactly right.
suggested.
We're adding that.
That was the new amendment Jim suggested,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I'm okay putting it together. We put both in there, and, I mean, either way.
Right.
Up to council.
I'm fine with it also. It doesn't bother me if we are taking care of it now, as long as we're covering all our bases.
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, then, subject to that conversation, can we have a motion?
Oh, I have one question. Do we have any leeway on the width of the trail if, with the ODNR grant? does it have to be 10 feet because of grant requirements? Or can we make it to what the city, like what would look better for the city? And are we just doing it 10 feet wide to get the grant money when we're already thinking about spending, what, 5 million or $4.5 million on other walkways? I mean,
Yeah,
we should.
it's 10 feet wide for the function of the trail. That is a safe function, and that is really the minimum width. For the intent of the grant is to operate a safe path. So if there's bike riders and things on it, it really should be 10 feet wide. If there is some area where there's we're working around a sensitive area or trying to avoid a tree, we can narrow it down. But that would be driven by really sort of an exception.
Right.
So the vast majority of the path will be 10 feet wide. And trying to make it smaller is really trying to make it substandard. And that would be a problem with the grant.
The trails on Beechwood, how wide?
We're not worried about Beechwood. This grant comes from ODNR, and we submitted it as a 10-foot trail, and only to be 8 foot if there is some, extraordinary issue with the layout of the path. So even though other paths exist out there that are 8 foot, 6 foot, you could find them, they're out there. But a new modern path built by paid for partially by ODNR, unless there's some extraordinary circumstance, it needs to be 10 feet wide.
I mean, I understand that, but I kind of feel like we're kowtowing to this grant for $500,000 when we're thinking about building paths for millions of dollars. I mean, $500,000 is a drop in the bucket compared to what we're thinking about spending. So why are we conforming what would be possibly better aesthetics for our city with a slightly narrower path just because the previous year, correct me if I'm wrong, it wasn't approved because it was 8 to 10. And so the newer grant said 10, and that's why it was approved.
I'll correct you because it always said the same thing. They thought that we were not clear in our application that we said the path would be 10 feet wide except 8 foot in certain locations. And we did not change the language from one year to the next. We pointed out to the people that were viewing it that they somehow didn't see that we had the width of the path clearly called out in our application. Didn't change our scoring, we still didn't get funded. But we did not change the width of the path on the application.
I'd like to weigh in on this too. We've talked in road and infrastructure about this, and I have talked to Don as well about this. The 10-foot width is really, to me, the proper one. I know you would like to see it different. It's proper from a number of different aspects, and one of them is the safety of it. In case, if you've ever been on the Beechwood paths, and they're 8 feet wide, if you've got two people on there and a bicycle comes the other way, it can be a hairy situation. I think the 10-foot, I don't know how my fellow council members feel, but I feel the 10-foot path and the width is the correct one for this, and that's what I think it should be.
But isn't that something we've already committed by saying it'll be a 10 feet wide?
Yes.
Yes,
Unless we want to do it narrow and then forego the grant. Those are
Correct.
our options, I think.
that's right.
And if 10 feet is the safer one, I mean, it's a done deal, as I see it.
Well, you all know me, I wouldn't throw $500,000 out for, unless it was a really, really big reason, so.
And I do understand your point. I also think aesthetically it might be more pleasing if it was a bit narrower, and I don't know if I feel the safety is as compromised. However, this is the grant we applied for, and it's a really good project. And so I think it's overall a solid project. And yes, if we could, especially if we, got to a spot where we approach the road, if we could shave a foot off of it to make it look better when it's more, visually apparent, that would be great. I don't know if that's realistic, though. But I just think that, it's a challenge because this is what they want right now. In the future, I don't know if that will be the parameters, but right now, that's what they're saying, and I think that's how we got the grant. Or, we didn't get the grant yet, but hopefully we'll get the grant.
Well, I will tell you, since we've been talking about this for a long time. When I'm in the metro parks and any time I see a path,
I always go there and mark it out with my feet to see how wide it is. I'm serious. And most of the metro parks are 10 feet wide. And I think there must be a reason that that's a width in the metro parks. And I think it looks good in the metro parks, and I think it'll look great on Gates Mills. And Don, is that correct? Are the metro parks?
Yeah, anything new that they put in is 10. They're not putting in any 8-foot paths. It's just not, it truly would be a substandard design. It would be like building a garage that's 18 feet by 18 feet. Could you park a car in there? Yes, if it's a small car. But nobody was going to do that with today's standards. And it's not just, yes, it is wider, but it's also, it gives the bike rider and the pedestrian a little bit more of a feel of safety as they do pass each other. And they don't have to think, oh my gosh, I need to slow down, or I need to step off to the side because somebody's coming at me and they're not that good of a bike rider. So that's really why they do it.
One quick question. I was asking this because they just did all that storm sewer work towards a circle on Gates Mills. I don't know where 10 feet wide would be on each side, and so if we were thinking 10 feet wide the whole way, did we communicate with the sewer, Northeast Ohio sewer district to see where the path could go to, so are we gonna have to do more work there now because of the 10-foot path rather than something narrower?
Prior to them doing any of their work, we indicated that there is a possibility that at some point in the future, we didn't know when, that we would be putting in a path. So we do have adequate space for a path.
We don't have to redo it. Okay.
All right. Could we have a, subject to the conversation that we had before regarding these modifications, a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Knoll?
Yes.
Ms. Atron?
Yes.
Ms. Welty?
Yes.
Mr. Daga?
Yes.
Mr. Lemay?
Yes.
Mr. Gentile?
Yes.
Dr. Wong?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Next, we would request another motion to authorize the bidding of the Edgewood Water Main Project. Don, why don't you take us through that?
Sure. We had gotten funding for this project a while ago. It's from the City of Cleveland Water Division of Water. They have a suburban water main renewal program, and it's designed to replace older water mains that have high break rates. We did the design of this work along with the sanitary sewer design in the section of Edgewood. But because of the funding requirement, we need to bid this out and get ahead of this before we do any of the other work on Edgewood Drive in those areas. We got this funding probably about 3 years ago, and because we knew that we had sanitary sewer work that was going to be designed, we did all of the design, all the surveying in that area at one time. So there was some savings for the city to just do it once. But we're breaking this piece out because we really need to get this done before they move forward with the sanitary sewer project.
Is the grant paying for the whole thing?
Yes, the cost is covered entirely by Cleveland Water. Once we bid it out, we'll submit a reimbursement request to them, and they basically cut us a check for the entire cost.
Don, I noticed there's a gas main that's been marked out there. Is that in preparation for this?
On Edgewood,
Yeah.
it may not be specifically for this, but sometimes a resident's doing something, they call oops, and then they come out and mark it. But we had it marked a while ago, and sometimes Dominion comes out in anticipation of, we've submitted all these plans to the utility companies, so they sometimes have to verify that their lines are where they say they are.
Thank you.
Does this
What's
cover?
what's the total project cost approximately estimated? Or the amount of the grant, either one?
The grant is actually tied to a bracketed number that's gone up year over year, and it's tied to inflation. So I don't have the exact number for you, but
It's the ballpark.
it's probably around $700,000, something like that.
And will this cover the entire Edgewood neighborhood then? Is that the purpose of this?
It doesn't cover the entire loop all the way around. There is a section of it that has very high break rates. It's an older line, and it replaces that piece essentially, it's probably about 60% of that neighborhood.
Okay.
This is one of the benefits that the city has received from participating in the Cleveland Water Agreement over these last years, and we've received some millions of dollars of main water line replacement as a result of our participation in the Cleveland Suburban Water Agreement. So,
Big chunk of Bolingbrook was done under this program, and Edgedale as well, two very long, older streets in town that got replaced.
and it's a very competitive program year to year to qualify for the grant. And basically, the competition is with other communities that may have higher break rates for some of their water lines, because there's about a $15 million annual cap that Cleveland Water has in the program for participation. And the money can only go so far every year. So I'm grateful that we were able to get this award.
Another question, now that the award was made several years ago, how much time do you have to complete the project? Or is that something you get an extension every year?
We got an extension because we knew we were doing the work on the sanitary sewer, so we're kind of near the end of their extension. So they'd like to see the construction, they'd like to see it bid out this year, and then we have time to submit request for reimbursement.
Okay. Do we have a motion yet on that,
Not yet.
Sheila? No. Do we have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Knoll?
Yes.
Ms. Acuff?
Yes.
Ms. Welton?
Yes.
Mr. Daga?
Yes.
Mr. Lemay?
Yes.
Mr. Gentile?
Yes.
Dr. Wong?
Yes.
Okay, great. Our next item is a return to the discussion of the walkway conversation that we've had pursuant to the outcome of the 2023 Community Survey. And we will re-engage with that momentarily. As council is aware, following this discussion, over the last number of meetings when we've had conversations regarding this, proponents or people in the community favoring the installation of paths have commended or suggested that this matter go to a public referendum. Opponents of this idea have suggested that it go to a public referendum. At this time, every single member of council has at least contemplated that it should go to a public referendum. Last week, we had a good discussion regarding some revisions to the planning and review process that Mr. Lemay had proposed and amended over time. And in this latest iteration, there were some timelines put in, which I think everyone appreciated. And it would bring to a conclusion in September or October the public meeting and discussion process. And it occurred to me, and this is totally up to council, that given the urgings of the public who have attended these meetings, that, and in some of the correspondence that council has received from the public, that this matter ought to go to referendum. It seemed that Mr. LeMay's process now fit neatly within a niche that would be prior to this November's election, and which I hope would take it out of anyone's concern that the conversation or the consideration by the voting public was being rushed or, not well considered, because I think this process creates that review and conversation, including the public town hall meetings, which will go even beyond the well-attended meetings that we've had here at council. So with that in mind, I had asked Mr. Byron to create suggested ordinance submitting to the electors of Pepper Pike the question of whether recreational trails should be even considered. Basically what the public had been asking us about. And I think it's always been challenging, how do you frame such a thing? As part of the conversation last week, it seemed from Mr. Gentili's comments that we do traditionally one project at a time, and I think the review by Mr. Shi had actually been requested review of his preparation of a deeper dive into a conceptualized path had been narrowed to Lander Road. It was my thought that if we're going to do, but the conversation had also been that, basically Lander and Shaker provided the two major spokes of this project before you got to other considerations of South Woodland, Fairmount, wherever. So it made sense that maybe we should at least get people's, since we're only going to be doing probably initially one or two roads over the next several years, if we go ahead and do it at all, that those be the roads that people at least weigh in on. And then if it happens and they get built, council, I guess, whoever that is, can consider at that time, do we go beyond that or not? And do you want another vote on it, or does council want to do it? Now, it's my opinion that council always has the ability to have made this decision to have a walkway installation without a vote. It's very apparent, listening to me at least, and maybe to others, that there seems to be a sentiment that both the public and members of this council may be more comfortable if it went to referendum and we were not simply relying upon survey results to draw the conclusion that we're going to do this sort of project. So the reason that I was suggesting this November was because there has been some criticism that the survey reached or had a response of 27% or so of our adult population responding. And although I believe in statistics and that the plus or minus margin of error of 1 means something, that 27% became something that people were less comfortable with than perhaps others who were comfortable with the statistical extrapolation that would offer. So it seems to me that at this November's election, there's going to be a very high voter turnout because, among other things, since even this was drafted, there's some very well, basically it's the women's health care abortion issue is going to be on the ballot. It's going to drive a huge turnout to the polls and in November. So I think we can anticipate Pepper Pike will have its typical 70 to 82% participation in this election this coming November. If we were to wait until the end of the process that council is considering, so it would be September or October, but in any event, past the first half of August, when a petition or a referendum has to be offered to the Board of Elections to be on the ballot, then we would get to the end of this process, and council at that point might conclude, well, we'd like to still put this to a referendum of the people. What that would mean is that it would wait at a minimum until the primary election, which I believe is next March. And that's going to be some typical of any primary. The voter participation is going to be far less than a general election. And it may offer, whatever the vote is, whatever the results of that vote is, if we put this issue on that ballot, make it subject to the same criticism that the survey is suffering from. It's people saying, well, not enough people came out and voted. We can't really rely that that's what people think. Because if it's even if it's a 40% participation, which would be a very large and robust primary turnout, and that would be unusual for a turnout to be that big, even in a presidential year, for a primary. It would still only be 40%, not even half of our electorate. So then if we waited until next November, the presidential election, which is a full year from now, more than a full year, is going to be a big turnout again, just like it is in this coming November. That also means we are going to have this issue festering with us here at City Council and in the public for the next either months until March, which is what, 6 months away, 7 months away? However, I can't count. Or even more than a year until we reach next November. I, for one, although I love visiting with all these lovely people every week, couple of weeks, I think it would behoove our city to get the population involved, let them, in an official referendum, voice their opinion, up or down, and council can then know where do we stand on this thing as recommended by a referendum and start moving on. Now, I know that today, the information is not currently today available for the public to make a vote. They don't know what they might want to know to do this today. With the process that council has already described here, by election day, they'll have all their information. They'll be able to make a vote. And if at the end of the process, council is simply going to end up again saying, well, it's been a good process, we've learned a lot, but we'd like the public to voice their opinion through a referendum, then we're simply going to be kicking the can and pushing it way downstream before that event can happen. It seems to me that with this process, the information that the public will need to make its opinion known will be there'll be an educated, informed public by the time the election in November occurs. And that's why I asked Steve, put this up, create this referendum, let council consider it. It's up to you guys, do it or don't do it. But those were my thoughts and my rationale as to why I thought we should advance it. Now, I understand that we only met last week, and it's only since last week that this came out a couple days ago that it finally got done. Mr. Byron had the audacity to go out of town for the weekend. But we got it out to you on Monday, and it doesn't have to be voted on tonight. If you can, great. If you want to, fine. If you don't want to, that's okay. What it would mean if you have an intent to want to get it on the ballot, we will have to schedule an additional special meeting to come back together and make that determination up or down between now and August 7th, 6th, whenever it is.
I'll check it. It's whenever the filing deadline is.
It's the filing deadline.
I think it's the 9th.
Is that the 9th? So no one's trying to force anything on you that, if you can, decide it up or down tonight, great. If you want to chew on it and marinate in it for a little bit, fine. But if we don't decide tonight, I think that the matter deserves us coming back together between now and then so that there's an affirmative decision one way or the other, whether or not you want this on the ballot in November. Because like I said, it seems to me, looking at this process, people are going to know what they're going to know ever about the subject by then. So that's why it's on your agenda. It's not in order right now, but I wanted to just make sure that was something we were all thinking about as we proceeded through this discussion of walkways and finally getting to item number 6 on our agenda of the ordinance. So with that, I don't believe there have been a couple of questions perhaps that you've posed to Mr. Shi that I hope he's been able to answer. for you individually or one-offs. Don does not have any presentation for tonight. I see there's a couple of things on our table. I don't know.
Let me dive in. So I distributed to you all a revised process. It is, other than some editorial cleanups, the major change of it is in the last line of paragraph 5, talking about seeking voter approval on that. I understand what the mayor is saying, and there's some logic to it. I get that. Bear in mind, early voting starts October 12th. So we would need to have all the town hall meetings, all the information, everything put together well before October 12th to make sure we have informed voters who can vote for this in a knowledgeable, thoughtful, careful, balanced way. And that's what we all want. So it's a tight deadline. I highlighted in my process in the boldface what the plan should include, all those items. Some of the work's been done. Don has some maps showing potential sidewalk locations. We have some FAQs, which are halfway done, I think. There's more questions to be answered in those. And we have cost information from Don already on various street segments. So there's a chunk of that's been done, but there's a lot more to be done to put together what I'm calling the walkability plan. I put it in a boldface at the bottom as that's the final document I'm envisioning that have a complete plan, specification, maps, FAQs, design drawings that we could distribute in advance of a public hearing, town hall meeting, so that everyone have in place and have a fully informed discussion. And then if we would move it to referendum, a fully informed vote. So my first concern is just the time to get all that done before early voting commences. So it's tight. Maybe it's possible, but we need to talk about that. The other concern I have is with the draft legislation that Steve presented, it is only focused on 2 streets, and I don't think it fully lays out the plan that I think we're envisioning is broader than just 2 streets, potentially, including South Woodland, for example. And of course, the Gates Mill Trail, which we talked about tonight, should be in the plan, though we've approved that already tonight. So I really want the voters to vote on the walkability plan that's the end of this process, rather than just, I'm concerned there's a lot of people in Pepper Pike who are not in this room, not involved. They'll walk into the voting booth and say, what's this all about? And so having reference to the plan in the legislation or in the referendum, if we would go that way, would reference them to the document they got in the mail in ahead of a town hall meeting. So it's a very concrete, fleshed out, clear thing. And I think I looked at numerous ballot examples in the Secretary of State voter guide, and you can reference a plan commissioned by council as the way that it is described. And so the 2 things are timing to get all this done by early voting and amending the legislation, which I've taken a shot at, to reference the plan as what the people are voting on. So with that, I'd love to hear everyone else's thoughts on whether we can get this done in time.
Go ahead. Ask a question. Can we discuss this before there's a motion on the table?
Yeah, there's no.
Okay. Let me just say that I think that 2 things. We were headed in this direction anyway, and the idea to have it in this November is solid because of the potential voter turnout. The other thing I would say is I think that there's going to be, if we were to pass this or some version of this tonight, I think there will be a lot more information than just the council is able to obtain through our process, because I think that there's going to be 2 sides to this who are going to put out information trying to convince the voters of Pepper Pike to go along with their vision for what should happen. So there's going to be 3 sources of information rather than just one.
If I can add, Jim, I guess a couple meetings ago, I was the one who said this is such an issue where we have strong opinions on both sides. And council will have to be like a Solomon and see if we can split the baby somehow or other. So my thought was referendum was a way to get the true sense of the community. But up to now, we have had 1 survey, 2 surveys, this result, not enough participation, statistics and all of that. At the end of the day, the council has to make a decision. And I think council itself is just as torn as the citizenry. So my sense is we should proceed with the vote. all that vote does, it gives you one more endorsement to the council to whatever position they're about to take. It becomes a pretty compelling reason to proceed or not proceed. Just because we have a referendum doesn't mean we have to do it, nor does it mean we don't have to do it. I recall well, and Manny is smiling, is when we had the Beachbrook issue, much of the citizenry didn't know what was going on, but folks got involved, and we had a resounding vote. There was no ifs, buts, and whats. Nobody questioned, was it representative? Is it really what community wants? And we are used to accepting election results. Both sides contact and canvass and communicate, and then the results would be, and then council has one more support for whatever position it wishes to take. So I would propose, I think Jim's process is great, and I think it should continue. But we can still have that other support from the referendum, so that when the final time comes to vote, we are not now pending, we won't have the arguments that I've seen in the council where somebody says, well, it was the 41%, 71% wanted this, and only 27% responded. I think we will have gotten rid of that problem. So at least we would know what truly is the consensus in the community. And I think the two can go simultaneously. I don't think one is dependent upon the other.
I'd like to speak up. I've been in favor of a referendum for a long time, as many of you know. And I think one of the important things is here, we've got a long process to go through. And Jim, I think your plan is good and sound, and it can be done. I work in a business, as you all know, that you've got deadlines all the time. And you can make your deadline if you set that deadline, and you'll get it done. And I think there's plenty of time to get the information out. I actually talked to a colleague of mine whose business is this, and I said, what do you think of this timeline? And that person said, yes, absolutely, it should not be a problem whatsoever. It's going to require a big effort of communication on the part of the city to get all the information out there, and it's got to be solid, and it's got to be available to everyone. The other thing I'd like to suggest is if we have a town hall meeting, we should have 2 or 3 of them, and also it's important that people who might not be able to come out, for example, some citizens who can't drive at night, we can't have all of these in the evening. We may have to have one on a weekend day or something like that. So we got to make sure that everybody can attend these, so that everybody gets the word on all these things. And I think it's very important to have this on the ballot in November, because if, for example, just let's say the vote is no. To me, if the vote is no, we are essentially stopped in our tracks. I couldn't vote for something that said the people don't want it. The most important thing is the residents having their voices heard. And this is certainly, and we've all recognized, this is such a substantial change for the city that we really have to know. And the earlier we know, I see nothing disadvantage about the earlier we know. I think it just makes all sorts of sense. So I'm in favor of this process. Jim, I'm glad that you have amended this to include this at the end, because as you know, I've mentioned that a couple of times that I would like to see that. So I think we should go ahead and do this.
And if I may add, Scott, when I see the opinions that are so strong on both sides, I have no doubts that they will get involved in the community before the vote. There'll be plenty of information shared by both sides, and then people can judge it and make a decision.
And I want to make sure that the information that's getting put out there is real, and that it's factual, and that it's coming from the city, and then people can base their opinions off of that. I agree. I like the idea of this going to a referendum. It was something that I supported when it first came up. I am concerned with the timeline. I'm concerned with early voting, and us being able to really do a thorough job to make sure that all of the citizens are aware of what the issue is, what the plan is, that there is no question about it. And that is my real hesitation with the November deadline, is all of a sudden this idea has come up, and now we're, again, this feels so familiar with some things this year. We are faced with a deadline, and we are forced to make a decision. And I think ultimately the decision will be a yes, but is it a yes right now? And the early voting That really concerns me. I'll share that when we ran for council, there was the Pepper Pike Civic League put on an event that occurred midway through October. And there were citizens who came, listened to all of us who were campaigning, speak. And so many people said, oh man, I already early voted. I already cast my ballot. I wish I would have heard the issues and all of this beforehand. And I just don't want to miss this opportunity. You know, Pepper Pike is celebrating its 100-year, our centennial. We've waited to do this. Can we just wait and do it correctly?
So I just want to agree and also note that for anybody who isn't aware, council just received all of this approximately 48 hours ago without any prior notice or hint or any opportunity to give feedback, and without any conversation as to whether we should put it forth at this meeting or how to shape it. And similarly, the community also, if they became aware of it, just became aware of it 48 hours ago. That's when it was posted. Generally, and I've said this before in many meetings over the past year and a half, I like a longer process. I believe that we should do everything on 2 readings. That was my experience when I was at the school board. I think it's good practice. I think it gives everybody time to ask questions, reconvene, possibly ask more questions, and then make a decision. Even if it's on a sewer project, I think it's good discipline to do things that way. And it really never extended our timeline because it was our work habit. We actually asked questions in a more timely manner, and it also made sure that everybody who needed to get anything to us got it to us in a timely manner. That being said, I think this effort, which again was produced without consultation of our council, isn't necessarily supportive of the proposal in that the information that this, Jim's proposal, the information we would glean from that would be rushed. I think it would lack a lot of the substantive information that people in our community would want to know before they voted, and again, before perhaps they early voted or mail-in voted. I think it's really important that everyone in this community can make an informed decision, and the way you make an informed decision is for us to give a thorough packet of information. I personally think that this should be mailed out to every household, that it should be posted on our website, that it should be available for pickup at City Hall if for some reason someone doesn't obtain it at home. I think everyone should have that information. While people who have strong opinions on both sides should certainly feel free to contact anybody they want and share their point of view, I don't think that that information can necessarily be relied on the same way that the information that we put out, which should be without an opinion. It should just be the plan, as Jim has discussed. It should be thorough and detailed. And I also think that the public meetings would allow people to come together. I like Scott's idea of doing more than one. People can ask questions, people can hear the impressions of their neighbors and understand the impacts of a project like that. I also think that because of all of this and the shortened time frame, it would eliminate a proper amount of time for community feedback, and that is very concerning to me. And I do think that while this is a November election and it will hopefully be, a lot of people will vote at this election, I think the March election would also be a very I think there should be a good percentage, especially if we're putting this information out there and making the community aware. So I really don't see that as a problem. I think we have the most transparency if we give ourselves time to do this the right way. And to me, that is a top priority. And again, I think it was said before, and I feel strongly, there are people in this room who feel strongly on both sides. They really like the idea of sidewalks or walkways. Some people are very against the idea of sidewalks or walkways. We are in a bubble right here. There are a lot of people in our community that have no idea that this is even a topic. And that might surprise people here because you're so engaged in that topic. But I guarantee you that there are plenty of people who don't know it's even an issue. And if they do know it's an issue, they don't understand the details. They don't know where it is or what it will look like. And I think the proposal that Jim is suggesting gives us the opportunity to make those people aware and have people who aren't necessarily as engaged or feel as strongly weigh in because their voice matters too. And so I really, as you probably have gathered from the meetings, support the idea of a referendum, although I appreciated the idea that the process should proceed without us coming to that conclusion right away. I thought that slightly tainted the process. But if we're talking about it now, I personally support the March referendum. I think that is just the better work product, a better way to get community feedback, a better way to engage with more people.
All I can say, I trust the citizens. Their vote will tell us. I don't need to spoon feed them. I don't need to give them information what to think. I think they will find their path, just as water finds its slope and rolls down. I have complete faith in Manny and his peers that they will do probably a better job than 7 of us to make sure the information is distributed.
And just to clarify, I trust the community too, but I think we owe it to the community. I think it's our responsibility and our obligation to the community to give them all the information, to not give it to them at the last second, to 48 hours before, to not give it to them halfway or in pieces and parts, to mail it to them so they can see it. I personally get a lot of political mailings. I've put out my own political mailings. I would suggest that people don't rely on political mailings to make a decision of when they vote. I think you have to do a little bit more work than that. And I don't think that should be a surprise to anybody else.
I think that we're balancing two things. We're balancing the position that Melanie is articulating so well and what some others have talked about, and that is, I think, I'm making an assumption here, but I think it's a good assumption, is that we have a guaranteed large turnout for November, as opposed to typical primary election, which, since we know what's going on in the national elections, we already know who the candidates are. I don't know that there's going to be any great need to vote in that primary election. I just don't think it's going to happen unless things change dramatically in the next couple of months or so. So that's what we're balancing, getting a large turnout and the benefits that provides with getting more thorough information. And I guess I would differ slightly with Melanie. People have been talking about this for quite some time. And, there's some people who are passionate about it, or there are all people who are passionate about it here. And I'm sure that they've talked to their neighbors and friends, and that maybe even though there aren't people here, there are people who are aware of it, maybe a little more aware than we would think, because this is really a hot issue. It's been in our 2 local newspapers multiple times. So I think that's the balance. If we're going to have a motion and vote on this, is perhaps more thorough information versus perhass a larger turnout.
I can add one more thing.
Kathy actually has
Kathy's
had
been
her hand up,
waiting,
yeah.
so let's.
Sorry. I just have a few issues with the wording of it. Recreational trails, if you look it up in the Ohio Code, it says that it's defined by a public trail that is used for hiking, bicycling, horseback riding, ski touring, canoeing, or other non-motorized forms of recreational travel that interconnect state parks and all this stuff. But is that the wording we actually want in the referendum? Because recreational trail connotates a different kind of feel than a sidewalk. And I know because of legal reasons we don't want to call it a sidewalk, but if we approve it, we should maybe find a different name to call it, like a path or a walkway. I mean,
Well, I'm responsible for that, and we went through a significant
Yeah.
process in Orange
Right.
Village regarding the issue. They chose to go with recreational trails for the reason that under the Ohio Revised Code, there is immunity to abutting property owners. So it takes that issue off the table completely. And in Orange Village, they determined that they respected their property owners enough to want to give them every advantage in terms of immunity. It's actually helping the insurance company for the property owners ultimately, but there's a reason for that, and there is very broad description of uses. I don't think you're going to see a lot of horses on this trail, but you could.
You could?
And more significantly, I think there's a lot of things that are going to happen, hiking, biking, et cetera. So I think legally, it's permissible to call it a recreational trail, and it's a policy choice whether you want to do that and provide that additional layer of immunity for an abutting property owner.
Can I ask two things now? Just one is that this process, which we've had a third reading, I'd like to make a motion to approve this as the process for planning and review.
I'll second.
Can we have a roll call, Sheila?
Before we get to that, I would again like to get Don's input as to this process, because I don't want there to be any, I want to make sure we're clear as to what we're calling on for our engineer to do. Because we talked about that last week.
is
and
this the-
I don't know if this is.
I don't know if I've seen
changed, or
the
is it
edited-
simply subject to the
Don-
conversation that we had.
Yeah, Don and I had a couple conversations about what I'm looking for offline. I called him this morning and I called him last week, where I took hours of his time. I think we're clear on, this is not specs, this is not engineering drawings at this stage. This is enough information so that people know what the general specs, 5 foot wide, generally with 7 to 10 foot off of the curb, generally following the contours of the street, but general meanders. It's all that kind of stuff that we talked about including in this, so that people have a good idea of what it looks like and where it will be. The open issue would be which side of the street, which I know real Kai's analysis, but they'll know which streets. And I want to get into a little bit further here about, other decisions council needs to talk about to give Don some direction on this. But I'm comfortable that, and I hope, Don, you're comfortable with our conversations, that I'm not looking for.
And based on what we had talked about, in particular about Lander Road last week, I was comfortable that we could put that information together for Lander, and I think we could also do that for Shaker as well, if that's what we end up choosing to do.
Okay, and I appreciate that, because I thought it was important to spread on the record, that conversation, so that, there was a common understanding of this.
And I think it's important, especially to what Jim just said, is that we're not putting out a plan that has every single detail of everything. And not only that, even if there were a plan like that, as Don has said many times, and if anybody has ever done a home project and it went exactly like you thought it was going to go, I'd like to meet you, because I have yet to meet that person. But I think this is the kind of information that is absolutely sufficient and for making a decision like this.
And I have in my mind's eye what the Walkley plan should look like in terms. I'm happy to write the introduction to the plan, because I appreciate the comments. This needs to be very balanced, very factual, very thorough, very complete, just so people have the information they need. And I'm happy to volunteer time to work with Don to get that moving.
And I can vouch for Jim's abilities, because during the income tax thing we had several years ago, Jim spent a lot of time on writing a lot of information and turned out a lot of information. And I am, by the way, the communication business is what I'm in. I am absolutely convinced that we can get the word out in time. I have no doubts about that at all. And I think if I could just say one thing at this point, what we're sort of deciding with this right now is we're not, even though it sounds like it says emergency in its first reading, it's really, we're deciding on a decision. We're deciding on who's going to make a decision. And again, it's so important to me that we have this decision as early as possible, because then we know if we continue down the road. I'm afraid that if we wait too long, then we're doing all this work, and then if in the end the vote happens to go opposite what we're going, then we kind of are stopped in our tracks. And that's why I think one of the reasons that we should go with this process the way it is.
I think one other thing is, even though the paperwork came to us 48 hours ago, we knew that this was an issue, that a referendum was an issue. All of us weighed in either for it or kind of leaning that way and so on. So just having it on paper in 48 hours didn't mean it was the first time we were able to think about it.
I would beg to differ, just, and I very respectfully, because you know I respect and like you, Tony, that, that I was kind of blindsided that there would be something on the November ballot, not on the March ballot, and I know people kept saying May, and I didn't understand why people kept saying May. I thought that that was odd, because it was a primary year. But I was really surprised, I will tell you that, and when I saw it, I was kind of taken aback, and I wasn't somewhere where I could read it again at a computer or on an iPad. I had to look at it on my phone, and I was pretty shocked, so.
If I can add a comment, Jim. This is my 10th and final year on the council. And I would say during the 10 years, 95% of the meetings, if you take Beach Brook and sidewalks out of the equation, where we were lucky to get one audience member. The fact for Beach Brook and for sidewalks, the kind of attendance we have, I think community is tuned in. There's no need to delay. We need to make a decision, yes or no, and move forward. If the voters don't want it, we end it. If the voters want it, we proceed. Delaying is not an option, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, just
Sheila,
as,
can we have
and
a roll
anecdotally
call?
anecdotally today, just so you know, that I was talking to a neighbor. She had seen somebody circulating a petition, and she said, yeah, they were circulating a petition because they're really engaged in the abortion issue. And that was not why they were circulating a petition. So I'm just telling you that people do not know. It was because of this. And I kind of thought it was, an interesting thing that just happened today.
Kathy?
I agree with it going to a vote to the public. I have a little bit of pause with only naming the 2 streets instead of the major streets, because I feel like it singles out those streets, and if you don't live on there, like the survey, you're just gonna vote for it, because, and then those people that live on those streets,
I have major reservations with the language, and I have new language, which I'm going to pass out in a moment, to propose that it's tied to this process and tied to the walkability plan. So it's not just 2 streets, tied to the whole plan. But first, Sheila, could we have a roll call on the motion?
Hold on, I need to call a vote, Jim, not you. So
Okay.
just excuse me for a second on that. Yeah, what Jim is asking for is a roll call on the process that he's
Process only.
proposed. Okay, hold on. I just want to make sure that everyone has been heard, who wants to be heard about this process. Is there anything more that you need to add, Mr. Shi?
No, not at this time.
Anyone on council?
Just one question. Don, how you sort of understand the timeline now. Can you evaluate how easy or difficult or capable this is being met?
Yeah, we have some time here for us. I mean, I guess, I know we're talking about November, and I know that early voting is like mid-October. So, I'm anticipating that we have, we're still in July technically, so I would, month of August, and sometime in September to have a document together. So probably about 6 weeks.
Oh, I have almost.
So this is my concern, if we happen to end up with an earlier referendum. I think October 11th is the beginning of early voting. And I think that people need to have a document in their hands, in their mailbox. It can't be something they have to go to the internet. They can't have to pick it up. It's going to cost us a little money. I just think that's the way it is. And I also think that I agree with Scott. We need to have more than one forum for people to come to. I prefer 3, but I think it's a really good point that some people can't go to an evening meeting, either for work, because they work, or because they don't drive in the evening, or, it's their one opportunity and they're just not, they don't have childcare, whatever it is. So I just want to make sure we could get all of that in, and that's a concern to me. And I want to make sure that we have that understanding of those items as we approve this document, whenever it would take place. My preference being in the
I left
early
it
spring.
open-ended on that.
I'm gonna count. I just pulled up my calendar. So in looking ahead at when we are set to meet, we have August 16th special council meeting, August 23rd. We have September 20th, September 27th. Our next meeting after that is then the 18th and the 25th, which is after special vote, or after early voting has begun. That really gives us 4 meetings of our body, if we use all of those. We could add additional ones, maybe. But that is not a lot of time to cover the amount of material that we're really talking about. So I think we need to count this out and really think about it.
I do think we're going to need special meetings and.
Town halls on top of.
Town halls and special meetings, yes, absolutely. As I say, if we set a deadline, if we set a goal, we can do it. I work in a business where I have lots of deadlines and somehow manage to meet them all the time. And I think this is important because, again, if we know in November that, just for the sake of argument, that the voters are for this, that gives us license to go on after that and can complete a lot of this stuff. Don, when could you be ready, for example, for a detailed town hall?
I could be ready for a meeting in, I would think, early September.
So that would, and we could have the town halls theoretically once a week?
It's up to you.
So you could, in 3 weeks, you could have 3 town hall meetings.
Good, yeah. I think if there's a benefit to doing it after Labor Day, just because everybody's kind of back to a normal schedule, people in school and all that stuff. If you do it sooner, you still have people taking kids to college and out of town traveling and that kind of stuff.
But just as a point, I would appreciate if we did those, that they weren't, it won't affect everybody, but it would affect me if it was on the Jewish holidays, I would not attend. And they're right in there, and that covers probably at least 5 days. So, I mean, probably more, but.
That's a reasonable request.
Yeah, I would request that. I think that's at least a significant number of our community who would be.
We have never scheduled anything.
I know, I'm just saying that knocks out a bunch of days, and I just want to have that awareness.
Phew.
Can we modify this plan to say 3, instead of at least 1, just to say 3 public hearings?
When we say up to 3,
Up to 3, okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I think we.
We may get to 2 and no one shows up, so let's say up to 3.
Pardon?
We may get to some point and no one,
Yeah, right.
people aren't coming, so.
Right. I mean, if you had 1 in the evening and 1 during the day on a weekend.
I think during the day, Scott's suggestion is a good
Yeah,
suggestion.
I think that's absolutely critical.
I give credit to a resident who informed me of that concern, so.
Yeah, different
Say
people have different schedules.
At
and we
least
have to-
2. We could-
Up to 3.
I need clarification on the last sentence of the plan. Does that sentence mean that if council adopts this procedure, that they do not adopt the ordinance putting the issue on?
No, it just said seek voter approval as a notion that we would pass an ordinance to do so. And maybe that's, we're going to do that in advance of that. Because we're contemplating it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Does that need to be rewritten?
It
so
probably
that-
does, it probably does. Why don't we just put a period after walkability plan?
Okay.
Because we're going to consider that tonight and at the next meeting we're going to have.
I had 2 technical edits also that aren't substantive, but I could talk to you after.
Well,
If this is going to be voted on by council, you should talk about it now.
well,
They're grammatical.
we're just,
On this?
Yeah,
Okay.
Well, then,
Just let us know what they're.
all right.
can we vote on this?
No,
I'll
she's
circle
got
it.
corrections.
She's got
she wants to
issues she wants to.
On this?
It's just technical language issues. Yeah.
And then, could we just
Wait, this isn't
update?
it. Oh, I mean on the ordinance.
I
no,
have
no,
lots
no.
of issues
This
on the
is
ordinance,
for-
so let's.
for-
I don't have any
Just
issues on
Jim's
Jim's. I have,
proposal.
okay.
All right, is there any more, yes, Kat?
So
Is this
for-
on the process plan?
Yes.
Okay.
So instead of at least 1 public meeting, can we say at least 2 public?
It says up
hearings?
to 3 public hearings, as well as notice of up to 3 public hearings.
How about at least three, but up to three?
Maybe,
At least two.
That's fine. I see nothing.
Two.
I mean, to me, the
But an
process.
evening and a day. The problem with saying no one will show up is we won't know if we don't have it. So that's the challenge of not having a
I would
third.
Two enough, is
recommend
three too many?
the simplification, which is at least two.
Yeah. at least
Just
two.
leave it at
Yeah.
that.
Right?
Because that
A
implies that
morning and
there
an
could be a
evening.
third
Right.
or a fourth.
So it reads at
I
least
can't
two.
count higher than that. That's
One for the word,
finance director's
You'd
job.
be the engineer then.
one for the word two. Okay.
Yes. Thanks.
Perfect.
Motion?
And I think you're going to reverse the voter, but you did that. Right.
Anything more?
Does everybody know what we're voting on?
Yeah, I'm so
Okay,
obsessed with
do we
the
have a
grammatical
motion?
errors.
We have a motion, I think.
Micromanagement.
Yeah, you
Someone
too.
make a motion? Who made the motion?
Jim made the
I made the
motion.
motion.
Melanie second.
Tony seconded?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
So
No
now
further-
it's as amended.
As
As
amended.
amended.
It's okay. I
As
took a red
amended.
pen.
Sheila, please call the roll.
Sheila, call the roll, please. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
the date for, Manny's asking for the date of this, which it's the July 25th, 2023 version.
We're passing it today.
That makes it the 26th?
That makes it the 26th.
Fair enough, Jim.
Sheila, will you please call the roll?
Mr. North?
Yes.
Ms. Lathrop? Ms.
Yes.
Weltman?
Yes.
Mr. Dada?
Yes.
Mr. Lemay?
Yes.
Mr. Gentile?
Yes.
Dr. Wong?
Yes.
You're proceeding. This is good. All right,
Can we talk about the,
Jim, you said you had,
yes. So,
but right now, we're still in the discussion of the walkways.
well, there's,
I have a thought. Should we hear audience comments now, perhaps, regarding the walkways project before we get to the referendum issue?
Are we going to do that every meeting then?
no, no.
No, I'm just talking
well,
about this
see,
one. No, I'm not talking about
Okay.
every meeting at all.
Just, the language in this ordinance doesn't reference the walkability plan, and I want an ordinance that references that. So that's what the voters approved. So I've drafted something that references that.
Okay.
So I would like to,
Want to circulate
I
that?
would circulate that, and not for vote tonight, because you're just getting it, but, and walk you through that, and then as a starting point, just so we know where we stand on that. And then I would like to circle back to, there's a few decisions that I'd like to talk to with the council for Don to take into account as he starts to think about his preliminary planning. But this is such a hot topic, I'd like to, if we can. So the thrust of these changes and the red line that I've given you is simply to say the vote is on the walkability plan, rather than a vote. Do you have enough copies?
I was going to, should we?
No, here, I got plenty.
Well, no, we have enough.
Oh, you do, okay.
We have
great.
enough. I apologize, Jim. Wait, did I take one? Scott, I didn't grab one.
I'm sorry, you can't.
The process is going to end up in a walkability plan after the public hearing and kind of finally approved by council. And so I'd like to have the legislation on the referendum, and I left the date blank, so that's subject to discussion, reference the walkability plan as reported out by council. And that's what people would vote on. And I agree with you, Melanie, they need to be mailed, so everyone has it in their hand. So before they go to the voting booth, they'll have a plan, they can read it, it can be online, plenty of ways. So it's not just a reference to a couple of streets, and in the plan, it would include that all the issues about maintenance, about city's gonna pay for it, there's no tax assessment, city's gonna maintain it, as well as all the things about the design, 5 foot wide, one side of the street and so forth. So the walkability plan would have all of that information in there, in one place, in one document, including a map. And so that's the thrust of this, is to reference that. And that is the principal change, and I took out, it's an emergency, because my intent was this would be first reading of this tonight in any event, so maybe a moment
Can I
on.
just correct you on a technical matter
Yep.
for that point?
Yeah,
This is a common issue. The emergency clause deals with the effective date of the ordinance. The three reading rule is the one that you suspend the rules to vote it on one
Fine.
evening.
Fine.
And so you've taken out the November 7th election, which is fine. I mean, it's your legislation. If you're going to put it on the November 7th election.
Then it wouldn't be effective for, yeah.
I would
got you.
recommend that you adopt
I
this on an
agree.
emergency basis.
I agree.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was flipping the two.
Yeah.
With the, suspend the rules and the emergency.
Right.
So, as amended, putting that back in there for, just for the effective date. And then we would decide to, this will be a one reading in any event, but we would have to have a special meeting, as the mayor suggested, to consider this more fully, which I think is appropriate in any event, to give everyone some time to think about whether we can pull this off, get the information done in time, by early, well in advance of early voting, so everyone has the information in their hands when they have a ballot in their hands. So I would be in favor of thinking about this, thinking with the reference to the walkability plan, have another council meeting as soon as we can get it scheduled, in next week or so, but before that deadline was August.
It'll be
No.
August when?
It's on August 9th. We have to get it in by 4 PM on August 9th.
So I just, so we ever have time to think about this and really drill into it, what we want to do. So I'd propose that we consider this and schedule another meeting with this the only agenda item on the meeting. To think
I
about
could
that.
support that. My preference, my strong preference would be that everyone is able to attend, obviously. I think it's important. And I appreciate you cleaned up my two language issues. Thank you. It was,
So
We could do Sunday.
Which were they?
I'm going to show you. So
we have to do Sunday or Monday.
whether or not is,
It's due Wednesday.
Is there,
We should give ourselves one day leeway.
Yeah.
because it's like,
We could do Monday, the 7th,
It's like if you think
Sunday, the 6th.
and ready or not, here we come. Like it actually means. So if you see, rights of way, but then somewhere else it says right of
Probably in the
way.
And when does it have to be turned in, Stephen?
For what?
Kathy?
When does this have to be at the BOE if council wants to
4
proceed?
o'clock on the 9th.
4 o'clock on the 9th. We're certain about that?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So which
Well,
date are
I
we
think
talking
that's a
about?
good suggestion that the
We're talking
clerk
about
has
the
made,
7th.
since we have a meeting of planning at 7 that night
on August?
on August 7th. Does council anticipate this is going to take more than an hour, or we can do it at 5:30?
Do it after, because I have
can't be
patients
there
until
by
6.
5:30.
But
I cannot be there by 5:30.
try to.
8 o'clock, just to make sure.
Just cut.
So that way-
just cut
We have
this.
planning that night. Planning should be over at 9?
Oh, so
It's a
after.
long meeting. We have a big item on it? Okay. 2 big items, okay.
Planning 7:30 and 6:30?
It's already been legally public,
Okay.
here, the notice.
We noticed
I
it.
will be here at 6. I will
All right,
make
we're
the
going to schedule a meeting for 6 o'clock on August 7th.
So 7 o'clock on August.
6 o'clock.
And Steve, in the meantime, if you have other comments on this, besides that one,
Sure.
we can get that in advance and finalize. So do we have consensus on that path forward, at least on legislation? Are we,
Any objection?
great. Okay.
So just what I'll be doing is putting back section 5 and adding that back into the caption.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yep, agreed.
And other than that, do you, I mean, is the intention to have a vote on November 7th?
Yeah, that's what we wanted,
For August.
I think we want to discuss
That's
that
the
on
whole
August.
purpose.
We'll discuss that on the next council meeting. and make final decisions on that.
Well,
And we'd
let me,
fill-
let me suggest that if you're not gonna, I mean, if you're going to meet on August 7th because it's to get on this November ballot, you just put it in there. And then if you don't vote on it, you don't vote on it. You don't put this in front of the voters.
Good. Or we could fill in that night.
Okay.
Either way.
One thing
No,
that.
I understand your point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that council should maybe consider, and, I think your walkability plan reference is good references, since that's what's happening. You may want to keep in, though, because I'll just share, the question that I think we've all heard the most from anyone is, who's paying for it and who's going to maintain it?
That's going to be in the document.
I know it's going to be in the document. You're assuming people are going to read the document. And I think that the thing, when people are in that booth, who may have, for some reason, not been engaged to read the document, that's going to be a question in their head. Who's paying for this and who's maintaining it? I think council should consider keeping the reference, as you say, to the walkability plan, but putting that information in, because that is what people voting are going to, they're going to want to know that.
Can we take that up on August 7th?
We can take that up. Just something for
Got it.
people to think about
Got it.
before we get to August 7th.
Because we'd have to be really careful with the language, because the community is paying for it. It's just not in an
No, we'll be careful,
individually.
yes.
Yeah, and
So if anyone else has suggestions on language and text, and, we can talk in between time, or talk with Steve.
Talk to Steve.
Talk to Steve, yeah.
All right. All right, with that, I think, unless anyone has anything more about that, we're going to move on from that issue. I think I think we should have officially a first reading where we're going to call for the agenda, ordinance 2023-06 as a first reading. We don't have to do anything more with that. We've already basically had our discussion.
As revised,
No, just the first reading.
this ordinance.
No.
2023-06 is an ordinance submitting to the electors of City of Pepper Pike.
Okay.
That's what you've read.
Okay.
Obviously, there can be markups as
Okay.
you've had that on the agenda, but
Yeah.
it's getting first reading tonight.
Great.
Okay. All right, so we've just plowed right through our discussion of walkways and ordinance 2023-06.
Could I circle back? There's a couple issues that I want to give Don guidance on from council, for the preliminary plan standpoint, and that is streets to be included in the preliminary plan. Is it Shaker, Lander, and South Woodland? Just to give some guidance, I'd like council thoughts. As, again, the walkability plan, I was concerned about only having two streets referenced in the prior legislation, because I think the envision is for more than that. South Woodland was the main one. But I think as far as the plan goes, I'd love council input on that, so Don knows what he's working with in terms of what the final walkability plan would include. I would like to have, the Gates Mill Trail we already approved that, that's already in there. But also the streets in which we would contemplate as part of the whole walkability plan. I would contemplate those three, but I'd like to give him guidance so that he can start preparing documents consistent with that, if it's something other than that.
Being Lander, Shaker, South Woodland.
Lander, Shaker, South Woodland.
And Chagrin is out right
Later.
now.
Well, that's all later, yeah.
Chagrin.
Is there consensus on that?
Yeah, that sounds good.
I'm still only comfortable with Lander and perhaps Shaker. Because that's, I think we need to test this out even
Well,
after it's.
This is the master plan, but I'm still in favor of doing one at a time.
Right.
And not all things, but I want to give the citizens an understanding of the vision for walkability in Pepper Pike is more than just two streets, it's adding that third one, South Woodland.
Can we somehow indicate that Lander will be the first?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I had in here that it'd be color-coded to show here, and a year tied to it, because I want the citizens to know, okay, this is the year my street might get a sidewalk. So Lander is red and Shaker is green and South Woodland is blue, tied to a date or something like that, so that people know what the approximate timing is of these projects.
And I think it's,
Phased, essentially.
That-
It's a phased
The
plan.
phases, right, the phases of the program.
it is important, I think, to have all three of those in, because to let people know that it is not just about one street, it's about three streets.
I did have the comment from someone that it was disingenuous to look at just two, that they didn't feel that the full, people would look at that language and say, but wait, where am I in this? And I think that that would address it, that the citizens would understand kind of what the anticipation could be.
The big picture, the whole picture
Yeah,
of it.
yeah. And then approve or disapprove it from there.
Yeah, it's basically like a master plan, which is.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we also talked last week about Lander being probably the first. And in my mind's eye, Lander, Shaker, South Woodland would be the order. We can talk later about how much of those in what year, but in terms of general in that order, again, to give Don some guidance on putting together documents.
I would just more prefer to see them like just phased out, not necessarily the order in which we're doing them. It could depend a lot on what our excess funds are
Well,
at that
to be
time.
sure.
And so I think that nailing it down and saying, oh, well, it's for sure going to be this, and then for sure, like, just, it's, the phases, maybe we need to call them A, B, C, D instead of like
That's fine.
numerically, just so that there's an understanding. It's not necessarily going to fit in order if it were to get passed.
And we might,
And there may be years, I can understand we could do, a circle to circle one year and then do the other half next year, or do one half of Shaker one year, then the other half of Shaker. I envision all of that, but just as an order to get people understanding about when will my street be affected by this? I wanted to give them some sense of conceivable timing. It's not,
well, and of course, it's anticipated, because if we were to do this, other projects could inform our decision of if we were perhaps doing some
Sure.
other road project, it could inform that. But I think anticipated, obviously is a substantive thing to put out there that people can understand.
And I'm glad to hear it's going in this direction, because it is important that we look at it as a project that is ongoing, and that people have an understanding. It's not going to be a really super detailed understanding, but I don't think you need that to make this particular decision, because you can get into a lot of minutia that really doesn't matter.
I think the minutia will matter at some point in time, so I don't want to get too general and broad, because those hiccups, when we come across them, they're going to be there, we're going to have to address them. So
But is that a council decision?
No, no, but I think that the community should know that there could be potential issues with any of these projects. Yeah, I'm not saying that we have to decide that, but
Right.
that's information for the citizens and voters. I don't see anything wrong with that.
I do think a voter, for example, might want to know where it would be placed on the land, for example. So how far from the street, how far into,
I would put that in the plan. Don and I talked about that, and his guidance was 7 to 10 feet off the curb, subject to, there's obstacles in the way in which you're going to have to move it around. But that's an item that would be an FAQ answer that I have in the walkability plan, so people know. I also would put in the FAQs, here's the right-of-way on each of these streets, how big it is. I mean, there's a number of FAQs we need to complete to make sure the information is complete, but I would have that in there.
okay, yeah, I think it's important. Otherwise, how do you make a determination of if you support something or don't
Right.
support something if you have no idea what it is?
Absolutely. That's all I had, to just provide some early guidance.
You squared away, Don?
I think so. I guess the only other piece in terms of, I could show those three streets as being sort of the primary or that initial framework, but do we want to show any other possible future extensions at this point, or does that cloud the issue?
I think actually what the voters are going to approve, no matter what detail we put in this, is the concept, and that it's always subject to modification down the line. So
Yeah.
they're going to be approving walkability, and the details are not spelled out 100% specifically, but in an indication directionally which way we're going to go. Because I can see where someone might say, well, gee, these are really great. Why don't we have them in the neighborhoods too?
Never know. Yeah. Okay.
Well, and it's always good to put those little disclaimers in there because it's bound to be at some point where something got planned and it varied a little bit, and, well, that's not what we were voting on, so.
It's like a house project, like the house project, Scott.
That's why I offered to write the introduction, because I want to put all that in the introduction to talk about, this is a preliminary plan and, you know,
Right, good.
This is a conceptual.
man plan, God's laughs, or something like that. What's that expression?
Yeah, if you want to hear God laugh, show them your plans.
Right?
Anything more? All right, we're going to then turn to committees, because Mr. Brzezinski is unfortunately under the weather. He was unable to attend for a Finance Committee meeting tonight, so that did not occur. I believe there was a Road and Infrastructure meeting. Scott, do you want to briefly report on that?
It will be a brief report because what essentially we did was we looked at some of the projects, like road projects that are underway and in the next year or so. Don went through all of those, and they're pretty much no deviations from what we were talking about. You'll be able to read those in the minutes if you're so moved. So,
Thank you. We'll turn to our department heads. Don, any updates regarding Shaker? We heard your good news last week.
Yeah.
AT&T was moving off their poles finally?
Yes, they're wrapping up, so, which is good, and they're continuing they are basically out of the way. We have our contractor is going to be mobilizing and bringing back materials and equipment over the next week or so, and probably early in August, they'll be back to it. They're hoping to knock out the remaining piece in about a month as far as that storm work, and then it'll just be some restoration work after that.
So are you anticipating by Labor Day or after Labor Day?
I would hope that they're substantially complete by Labor Day, and then we will be coming through and doing the paving right after that. So timing-wise, the paving is out to bid right now. Hopefully, we'll be able to award that in August and have the contractor start sometime
All right,
mid-September. So
You've got your bid documents
everything's
out.
kind of falling into
So
place.
just to clarify, I understand that they're still doing a lot of this work, and therefore they can't move the cones and affect the street. But if we have a gap of a month or 6 weeks, can we remove temporarily the cones? Because it really is, especially now with South Woodland also being under construction, really interesting to try and access.
It's today and yesterday was a challenge for sure. The contractor that's doing the storm work, they will be back on site over the next week or so, and then they will be working actively. Once they're done, they're going to take their cones and go away. And so then the road contractor that's going to do the paving, it's more of a moving operation, similar to what's happening on South Woodland. So it opens back up fully to traffic at night, and there's a lane, and they have to flaggers and that kind of thing, but it's not a road closed
So
situation.
whenever they're done with this next phase, we will be open.
You'll be back to normal.
Of
There will
course
still be
we'll have
construction activity, but it won't be restricting a directional flow.
That's fantastic.
Yes, so that's what we're hoping for here shortly, so. And as you may have known, South Woodland, we just mentioned, they started their milling process, actually the last couple of days, and it's actually in pretty good shape underneath there, which is good because there's not a lot of base repairs, so that's hopefully going to save us some money on the overall project cost. They're making pretty quick work of it, weather dependent a little bit here, but they're moving along, and they should be done with that in the next couple of weeks.
Are they paving during daylight, or did you say they're paving during the evening?
No, they're paving during daytime, yeah. Right now, they did the milling work over the past few days, and they're finishing that up, and then they're going to start with the paving process.
Okay,
Moving along.
thank you. Okay,
We had a couple burglaries in the past month. I just wanted to remind everybody of the vacation watch option in the drop-down menu at pepperpike.org when you're on the police page. You can go ahead and, even if you're gone for a few days, in both instances, they were out of town for less than a week, but somebody was able to tell whether it was newspapers or other reasons. But if you go to pepperpike.org, midsection, the drop-down menu for vacation watch, you could enter in there however many days, and our guys go out and check on the house a couple times a day. It helps, and we can develop a better time frame then. to try to figure out when this person may have entered the home.
Chief, did they break through a door, break through a window? What was it?
Forced entries,
Forced
back of the
entry.
house,
Okay.
slider, window.
Chief, could you also just mention what's happening with the post office, the checks that are being stolen out of the outside boxes?
So that one, I believe when you had discussed it, that was actual break-ins to the post office drop box. And I think you said that was Mayfield, correct? The Lyndhurst.
Yes, right.
Yeah, so, I mean, that does happen as well with the mail theft, sometimes internally. In these instances, it was at the drop boxes.
The internal or external Dropbox?
This was external drop box.
External Dropbox.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
The post office has published a recommendation that if you have checks that you're depositing, that you should bring it inside and deposit it inside the post office and not use their external
Because
drop boxes.
what's happening is that people break into that box. If you've put a check, if you've mailed somebody a check, then they're able to, there's several different ways that the people can do it. They're able to erase the information from the check, make it out to somebody else themselves, and then change the total on it. And then, so if you wrote a check to the utility for $59.95, all of a sudden you see it come out as $8,000 to John Smith.
Yeah.
So it's something that's been a problem here. It's a problem in Beechwood.
Yeah, religious institutions as well, if you're making a donation, you leave a check in the mailbox, we had that issue with a couple of the different organizations in our city where those checks went missing and they were laundered or washed, like you're talking about.
The other ones that we run into a lot is people just print a check on your account. They have your account number, anybody you've given checks to, and every other month we have some instances among our clients where we see somebody just printed a check on laser printer, processed it, and then you go through a heck of a process to close that account and all of that drama, you know.
Right.
Well, our police have been ever vigilant on investigating these things. Our detective bureau has been very active and has been getting some good results regarding some of these situations they've been confronting. So as always, kudos to Detective Kuznick in particular, but to the department as a whole.
Yeah, but the more the vacation watches, even the better.
Now,
We
Chief,
love
on
people
this
sign up for that.
burglaries, did they have alarms or they did not, each homes?
I know there was some, home alarm, like ring type.
But not the
device.
one that automatically connects to a
No,
a
nothing
10?
like that.
I
No.
see.
No.
Right. It's not the way.
Thank you, Chief. All right, you good, Chief? You're good. I don't have anything to add. This evening, we've had some unfortunate rain events, although the city has fared pretty well with them, which I'm glad to report. And it's interfered with some of our community events. We've had to retreat into the service garage, thanks as always to the service department and the great accommodation they make for people to come inside the service department. The nice clean garage, otherwise known as Pike Theater, to hear the music, watch the movie, do whatever. Hopefully, for the balance of our performances and events, we can return to the environment of our park. Council, you have anything to add this evening?
I do. As a member of the Orange Community Education and Recreation Commission, I've been asked to share news about an upcoming event with you. I'm pleased to tell you that OCER will be celebrating 50 years of celebrating our community. The Orange Community and Education and Recreation was formed in 1973 by a group of forward-thinking residents of our Orange School District who recognized the value of community-based recreation and lifelong learning services. Now, 50 years later, OCER continues to thrive, serving more than 10,000 people in the greater Orange District area and beyond every year. From sports to preschool to theater to fine arts to youth, adult, and senior adult recreation to aquatics and even summer camps, OCER serves participants of all ages and abilities with the singular purpose of building and engaging people through learning, discovery, and active recreational experiences for all. In recognition, of OCER's first 50 years, the organization will host OCER's 50th anniversary celebration on, put this on your calendars, Saturday, August 19th from 2 to 9 p.m. on the Orange Schools campus. Games, activities, inflatables, live music, and fireworks will be free for all. Food trucks will be on site. For additional details, head to www.orangerec.com/events, and I hope to see you there. Thank you.
One other comment. We talked a little bit about this at the Road and Infrastructure meeting the other day. I really enjoy the large venue that we have, and we can have so many people here. I was just wondering if we could consider updating council chambers because it only holds, I think, 29 seating, 5 standing, and update the media so that we can maybe expand everything and maybe even put that heated bathroom right on the side so people can go use.
I think it's something we should at least explore. I mean, I know this is a challenge that we're here. It's not our usual location, and I think that's problematic ultimately. I mean, we are very appreciative, of the school district for allowing us to be here, and we are fortunate that this is in Pepper Pike, but it would be a really nice asset. And it doesn't have to be a grand project. I don't think it needs to be. I just think maybe we could either bump it out. Maybe there's even a possibility to reclaim some of the internal space and reconfigure it to keep the cost down, but still be able to have at least a group of this size. And I think at least at the meetings we've had, we have been close to or over the limit, Chief, and I don't know if that's what we want to encourage. So it's just something to really, I think, take seriously.
Well, I understand and I appreciate the councilwoman's comments. It's something that, in fact, over the last 2 weeks, city staff has been evaluating and reviewing. And thanks again to, Scott still here? Bilski? Thanks again to the school district, to the school board for accommodating us again in this venue. Really appreciate it. We needed it last week, absolutely. I would note that by a head count, we actually could have fit in our city council chambers this evening. This would have fit the audience that we have here for this meeting. So they are. It's interesting. There are one-offs every now and then. Issues come up, be it Beachbrook, Medina Creative Living, this issue where we do have this demand to move out into a larger venue. And I'm very glad that even though we're not in Pepper Pike, we're in Moreland Hills right here, I think, that the school district nevertheless has accommodated us. There are a lot of economics involved as to what's your return on investment for a major expansion of the building itself and a footprint. It's obviously a very major undertaking. One thing we have been looking at, though, is within the existing footprint, can we expand the size of the council chamber? We've gone ahead with a service department renovation, a police department renovation, all within our existing footprints, although the service department bumped out a little by necessity. Something we're looking at and evaluating, and we'll, as we go forward with the plan, we'll share it with council if there is a plan. But it's tough as to how do you capture within. We do have a second floor of our building, which is underutilized. It's City Hall has a pretty big second floor that's used for storage by and large. It's not always the most efficient storage in the world. The HVAC, unfortunately, the plenums do not reach up into that second floor. And So it's complicated particularly in the summertime, how would you move people up there? There's no ADA to get up those stairs. We have an elevator that stops at the level it stops. It doesn't get up that extra floor. So there's an awful lot into the consideration, but I appreciate your
And to
comment. It's
clarify,
something,
yeah, I
it's
think-
something we think about not infrequently.
We were talking about something modest in scale, either a small bump out or relatively small bump out, possibly with resolving that bathroom issue, or, as you mentioned, and I think I said, recapturing some of the internal space because offices are used differently. So just a thought. I think it could be workable, and we are talking about taking on other very expensive projects, so this would be,
Right.
It's
But
much
I
smaller.
think listen, 15, how many years ago is it now? I've been 12, 15-plus years ago, the city evaluated a very major renovation and building project of the municipal campus, including an expansion of our police department to 12,500, was it 12,500 feet or 17,500 feet? I forget. I forget which, was the 12 the money and the 17 the square footage, or was 17 million the money and 12 and a half the square footage? It escapes my memory. But, we've avoided all of that and instead have been very successful using the bones of our structures for the last, call it 15 years. And in a very affordable way over the last several years, made significant renovations to our existing physical plant that accommodates a 21st century police department, service department, and the fire station has been improved considerably so far as the living quarters, things like that for the men. And we've done this for a fraction of the costs that major new construction would have required. So we're going to look at it, always with that in mind. How do we do this in a fiscally responsible way that still accomplishes the goals that we need to accomplish to bring, this one remainder of our physical complex, up to standard for what we need.
One
So-
other option could be also expanding our council meetings to virtual, also options like Orange does, and maybe then there is a less need for people to actually physically come, but they could still interact with us over Zoom perhaps. So that's another option we could explore too if we're not thinking about actually expanding council chambers.
I think that's actually a good point to make right now, and that is that we have some issues coming up here with the whole walkability discussion. And this particular meeting, because we're in a different facility, we can't show it live on YouTube. I'm recording it over there, and it'll be up on YouTube tomorrow. But I also would, and we've talked about this before, I'd like to see our not only streaming our meetings, but also the committee meetings, so people can get involved in those. I think every communications improvement that you have with the residents is if you want people to be involved, they have to be able to get there. And a lot of people can't come down to these meetings. And Zoom gave us all a taste of what it's like, what is possible out there, what technology is. I really hope that we would consider that. I don't know how the rest of council feels about that.
I think it's something to consider, and it just made me think that we never really addressed, but when we do discuss walkability, we should be streaming that event also. I think it's really important to, and have it obviously promptly put on anything we talk about on the website so people can access that. I think that's part of our responsibility.
Well, speaking of the website, there will be a launch of a newly configured website after the first week of August.
Yes.
And I want to thank, particularly Becky Kovach, my administrative assistant, who's been very engaged, Sheila, Scott Newell, Michelle Halloran, who all have, along with me, been looking at the, improvement to our website through our vendor. And I think it's going to make it they're already, through this process, we've made improvements as we've become more familiar with abilities of the website we did not even appreciate, so far as getting our YouTube streaming baked into our website in a much better way. And so there should be a new website appearance, not totally turned over or dramatic, but certainly improvements in the next couple of weeks. We should see it roll out. I don't remember the exact date that
Yeah,
the launch was.
I think I know, but if I don't know, I'm not going to
Okay,
say.
it's coming up in the next couple of weeks, I think.
Is that a committee that made
all
that
right,
decision?
What?
Is that a committee that worked on that Michelle and Scott? And
Yes,
what
yeah.
committee is that?
The Communications Committee.
And the members
It's
are?
Scott, Michelle, Becky, and Sheila has been the ex officio member since she does a lot working on the website.
I've been on the Communications Committee forever.
Well, that makes
I
sense.
hardly believe that, Scott. Why would they choose you?
We're going to turn to any audience comments for this evening. Are there any audience comments? I see a hand over there.
Thank you. My name is Skalka. I live at 30449.
Lisa, can I interrupt you for 1 second?
Yes,
With all respect, I know you wrote a letter that the council has, and you spoke at, significant purpose and length at the last two meetings. If you have new things to say, I encourage you to put that at the front end of your comments and not simply a reiteration of what's occurred already.
All due
Respectful.
respect, sir, I do have new comments, but as a taxpayer in Pepper Pike, I am entitled to my voice and my opinion, and this is the place for it. I will be as
Could you
brief
come,
as I
no, but could you
possibly
come to the
can.
microphone possibly, so it could be part of, I just think that it would be valuable if people can be heard on the recording.
Can you hear me?
Required to, but.
Can you hear me now? Was that commercial that does that? Okay. My name is Lisa Skufka. I live at 30449 Shaker Boulevard. I am the little white house at the northeast corner of Shaker and Lander. First, I want to thank you all for being here and for presenting all this information and for allowing us all to have our few minutes to speak. I want to point out that none of the council members, including Mr. Shi, live on Lander Road or Shaker Boulevard, and only one council member lives on South Woodland. So I really don't feel like you have a real investment in these sidewalks or walkways. Number two, if Mr. Sheehy has been tasked, which he has been tasked to come up with preliminary designs for the walkway, which will be on Lander, the Phase 1, at last month's meeting, he made a comment that he just kind of randomly chose, my words, not his, the east side to do the sidewalk design. I don't think that that's really a good way to choose something, because on the east side of Lander Road, which my corner is the east side, and as you know, I have pointed out that I have a Dominion gas station on my corner, as well as 3 utility poles. The east side of Lander has several utility poles, many more obstacles than the west side. The west side has less trees closer to the curb, has less utility poles, and has more green space. So logically, that looks like it might be the better choice to make a design for the sidewalk proposal. I urge council to, and Mr. Sheehy, to really take a real good objective look, drive down Lander Road, and really make an objective look at both sides to think about where might be a good placement should this pass. And I am against the sidewalks, but should this pass, that needs to be done. There are less obstacles on the west side than there are on the east side. One question that I had about that Mr. Byron had made a comment about the wording of the recreational trails. He made a reference to the insurance liability if they're called sidewalks. That inference was that residents would have more liability if they're called sidewalks and recreational paths. I need some clarification on that, because that kind of, made me really think, oh my gosh, what's going to be the liability, the insurance liabilities for having these sidewalks placed on my property that am not in favor of. So I would need some clarification on that. Again, if there is a surplus of money in the budget, which is stated here on the agenda, instead of building sidewalks, why can't that money be distributed amongst the people that have been tasked with paying for the sewers, which is not even done, and I'm still waiting for the soil to be replenished on my property correctly, as well as others. But instead of building sidewalks, if we have surplus money in the budget, why can't that be split between the 88 residents that have to pay between $30,000 and $40,000 to complete the sewer construction? And fourthly, or the last point I want to make is that instead of sidewalks, you're talking about revamping the council room? Put the money towards that. Thank you. Is that brief enough for you, sir?
Thank you very much for your comments.
Mayor, could we just I would like Steve to talk about that, just the language about why that.
Sure. Under state law, there's an additional layer of protection that is provided to recreational trails. It expressly states that if a property abuts a recreational trail, the abutting property owner is not liable for anything that happens on that trail.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Mr. Neff.
Manning Neff, 2632 Sound Center Road. Just a few short, comments on there. I think council needs to be congratulated very much in regards to the conversation that's occurred. If we go back in history a little bit, if you go back to February 25th of 2021, the only thing that was being discussed was a Gates Mills Boulevard trail. That was the answer to all the requests by all the citizens in regards to walkability in the city of Pepper Pike. And that came in just as a parachute item into that meeting with 48-hour notification that we were going to talk about a $1.2 million project for the city. Okay, and with that, and that's all that was going to happen, was going to be that path. And council said, wait a minute, okay, we need to see full walkability. Okay, we need to see a survey of the community. What do they really think about this $1.2 million project that's going on here? So if it wasn't for council, saying back, okay, we need to look at this whole walkability, item on here, and saying that they wanted a survey, none of this further discussion about walkability and sidewalks would have ever occurred. Okay, that wasn't even on the table. Okay, and the issue then gets to, at that point in time, when a request was made for a survey, the comment that was made by the mayor was that I'm not a survey kind of guy. Okay, and with that, it took months, it took years then to get the surveys done. So part of the delay, here has been the lack of really wanting to get the community involved. And as you can see now, the community really is involved. Council has made sure that the community knew what was going on. And again, I want to commend council for getting that information out. The other significant item, on here is that we need to recognize the finance committee. Okay, Jim LeMay is the head of the finance committee, and you have Mono on here, who unfortunately has decided, to retire on here, and Tony, and we've got some new people, on the finance committee on here. But if you go back 12 years to when this all started, the city was broke. Okay, we don't have any money to talk about trails on Gates Mills Boulevard. We don't have any money to talk about sidewalks. We don't have any money to talk about anything on here. When they came in, okay, there was $0 within the city coffers on here. And over these 12 years, they have been able to amass 15, and I don't know what the exact number is right now today, but I know at the beginning of the year it was $15.7 million, okay, on here. And it's due to their efforts and looking at the whole picture, and with that, and they need to be recognized for being able to put this together and to be able to happen, that we're able to talk about, and we've already approved, and citizens really need to be aware of, that we are going to get this walkability on Gates Mills Boulevard. And that was one of the key items. If you wanted a place to walk, strollers for kids that were learning to ride with training wheels, for non-professional bikers, place to walk and things like that. And we're there, okay? And now we need to, finish that off. So the other discussion now about the further sidewalk item now is extra, gravy, on there. And again, congratulations, to them, and to sticking to their guns and making sure that the right questions were asked and answered and put together on here. So kudos, to you folks, for doing that. Thank you very much. Other just real quick questions or comments on here in regards to the language on there. Mr. Mayor, you talked about putting, and I agree with it 100% on there in regards to the installation costs aren't going to be the citizens' problem, and the maintenance cost isn't going to be citizens' problems. What also needs to be in there, which was just now talked about, was I think insurance should be mentioned in there, because that comes up over and over and over again. Am I going to be liable for this? I think a quick note should be right there, on that, language, that the insurance is there. And then also that something needs to be talked about the landscaping that's going to, be happening on here. Hey, I'm just making up, I have major landscaping, type of item that's going on. Who's taking care of that landscaping? Hey, the city is taking care of, that landscaping item. So adding those, 2 items on here, I think would be very, very important on there. In attending the road and infrastructure, meeting on there this last week, 7:30 in the morning. Thank you very much for my retirement for having me get up and attend that meeting on here. There was a very significant conversation that happened in there in regards to that they want a mission statement. They want to know what they're really charged to do and not do. And that's been a concern of mine for years, and I've talked to Scott Newell, who's been in charge of the road and infrastructure for years on there, in regards to why wasn't the Gates Mills Boulevard project taken to road and infrastructure? We've got an infrastructure committee. It was never talked about at the infrastructure. Okay, we redid Lander Circle. We redid the Shaker Circle on here after the gas company had the accident there. That was never discussed at the road and infrastructure. The traffic pattern was changed there. So I think that there needs to be, to what they said in the meeting on here, and just adding on to what Scott said that occurred at that road and infrastructure, that there really needs to be a very formal, mission statement in regards to what they are responsible to do. And I think Council was 100% correct in regards to taking Jim LeMay's, process on here and identifying what, items needed to be, talked about. And as far as the meetings and things like that, there's a lot of people that aren't here tonight because of the weather, okay? And there's been a lot of people that stood in the hallway for 3 hours a month ago in regards to when we started having the first conversation. They stood there for 3 hours, okay? And Council's sitting in their chairs. These people don't have any place to sit. There's nothing being shown on any screens about what documentation that we're going through. They can't hear what's going on. There's no copies of things that are passed out, on here. So if you're looking for, and I think it was, Mano's comment on here, for years, okay, there was one person, Mary Ann Luchin, who came to meetings, okay? And you know why? Because it isn't friendly for people to come to meetings. And you don't want, and if you're looking at a person, they really don't feel that you're looking to engage them. You're talking about, the website improvements on here. Right now, the Gates Mills Boulevard Trail, the application to ODNR for $500,000 and a $1.2 million, project. That's not on the website. There's no data for people to find easily. All of the things that Council gets in regards to, this is the website update. This website update should have the item where the information that Council is given for a meeting is all together in one package, in one folder. They get it there. It can also be printed out, for them. But this way, all the citizens can have access, to that documentation, and all this stuff is in the right place. And that stuff be shown on a screen. We're in the year 2023. And for us to talk about, items on here, and we don't know what you guys were looking at. That's wrong.
Can you wrap it up, Manny?
Almost done there, almost done there. I guess the last major item is, right now, and again, kudos to council, we're gonna have $15.7 million, we have $15.7 million, in the coffers right now that we can spend on these projects on here. In 5 more years, that's gonna be 25 point some million dollars on here. We don't have a long-range plan on how we're allocating those funds. Okay, we're talking about sidewalks now, we're talking about Gates Mills Boulevard Trail, we're talking about, okay, what are we gonna do with the Beachbrook property if some of that land is available, to us out here? We're talking about sewer items out here. We need a plan, okay? We need a pie chart showing that there's $15 million, and $8 million, and just making up the numbers in general, that $8 million is put in a rainy day fund. And that $1.2 million is gonna go to the Gates Mills Boulevard project. And $3-4 million, is going to the sidewalk projects out here. Not to have a plan, and when it's been asked, to have a plan, and have the plan based on the survey that was out there, the item was, we don't need a plan. That to me is unacceptable. So thank you very much for your time, I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, I'll note that the East Mills Path has been posted on the website for a couple of years now. Yes, ma'am.
Sonia Savakova, 29276 Bryce Road, Pepper Pike. Since we were able to dismiss the survey results based on dubious understanding of mathematics, if we don't get the referendum on the November ballot, and it happens in March, and participation rate is under 50%, what's going to stop the powers at play to discredit those results as well? And what is your plan? If we're not going to believe in science or math, right, this is just Groundhog's Day. I answered both surveys. I didn't come to the meetings because I felt my voice had already been heard. To pretend that this is some idyllic countryside where sidewalks conjure this nostalgia of days gone by is just complete detachment from reality, that we live in a neighborhood full of massive SUVs that when they impact pedestrians, they hit them right in the chest, not in the knees like a sedan in the 60s used to. So yeah, I want to pretend that this is some isolated town, where it's still the countryside, but this is maybe a more busy neighborhood with large luxury SUVs of distracted drivers, more so maybe in our surrounding communities even. As I drive my kids to camp at Orange Rack, cars pass me on the right, approaching a school zone. At the years of lockdowns during the pandemic, we owe it to the children and the families in this community to unshackle them from their properties, give the kids the autonomy to walk down the street to a friend's house, to contribute to the home and maybe walk to the grocery store, or just take the dog for a walk. Let's stop shackling these kids and older adults at home. Communities that have sidewalks are healthier than communities that don't. And there's journal articles that link sidewalks to, or lack of sidewalks, to childhood obesity. I think we need to wake up and realize that just like we're not gonna make the path 8 feet because it needs to be 10, because that's what's safe, at some point you need to advocate for the public, even if the public doesn't understand the value today, that this is what our kids need. And yeah, kids don't vote, so you know what, they're not gonna be at the November ballot, but I'll tell you, if they could, I know what the outcome would be.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your comments. Yes, Vera, yeah.
Vera Barta Savage, 29600 Shaker Boulevard. I have 3 points today. The first one has to do with safety is paramount for our children. And the reason I say this is my first house that I bought, the first day I moved in, I found out my niece was killed in a fatal pedestrian accident. Also, that same house, the people sold it to me, they actually moved because their daughter was killed in front of their house. I didn't know that at the time. And both of these children were killed not on sidewalks. So that's really personable to me. The second point is I'm a diabetes educator. I counsel, I coach, I talk about diabetes all day long. And one of the things is walkability. One of the first defenses for diabetes is physical activity and exercise and getting out and walking. So that is the thing. Right now we have 11% of our population is diabetic. In 2050, it's projected that 35% of our US adults will be diabetic. That is so overwhelming. And there's a simple solution, walkability. Getting out. My husband passed around, I don't know if you have it, but it's a walkability from AARP. And it has some really good sources, and it talks about 47% of people that have sidewalks walk 39 minutes a day. 39 minutes. When I counsel a diabetic, I tell them walk 30 minutes a day. So that makes them healthy. Their blood sugars stay in line. So it's really just important to have this. We have sidewalks all over. I don't know if anybody else grew up with sidewalks. I grew up with sidewalks. I lived in communities with sidewalks. Sidewalks are super important. And it's not, it looks better. I mean, to me, sidewalks are just really important. The third point I want to make is walking instead of driving all the time. Why is it I have to get into my car and drive somewhere to go exercise and to walk? It seems kind of silly. We all talk about global warming and this and that and, being environmentally safe, and we're getting in our car to go exercise when we could just go outside and walk down the street. I would get one of those granny carts that my mother had to go to the store so I could walk up to Heinen's. I mean, it's just mind-boggling to me. I'm glad that it's going to a vote. I wasn't glad at first, but at least it's moving forward. I found a document from 2001 that stated in 1974, they were talking about sidewalks, or whatever you want to call them, paths. So for 50 years, we've been talking about this. I think it's time to get it wrapped up, and let's move on and be like other communities. Dina Campbell, I don't know if she's here today, but her daughter was hit on South Woodland. It didn't seem to move anybody. We don't want any fatalities or somebody being maimed or injured. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Do you want me to come up to the mic?
Please.
I don't know if I'm the last person to comment, so I'll be brief because I know everybody wants to go home. But I just want to say a few things about the discussion today. The first is that, yes.
Name and address.
I'm sorry, Megan DeGiorgio. I'm at 1 Hunting Hollow. The Pepper Pike electorate is, if you look at the data, is a highly educated and well-informed group of individuals. And I know there were some concern today about getting information to them. I think all of us as voters, the onus is on us to go out and get the information. I have no doubt that the city engineer, who in a very agile manner put together a very thorough FAQ, that we can put together materials, that council and the city can put together materials in a time frame that will allow us to meet the early voting deadline. So to that end, really the only obstacle for meeting the timeline for early voting and the November election at this point is council. So I'm just asking that you please really consider that you will have very good turnout for the November election and that we should really work towards that milestone. The last thing is that back to school and vacation is over, because I know we're all wrapping up our vacations. That is a great time to start holding town halls in September when people are energized, they're back in the household, and kind of things are getting back to normal, because I know summer is crazy for my family. I'm sure it is for everyone else. And then lastly, I just don't think this is, I appreciate the thought and care that has gone into the discussions over the years, but this isn't Brexit. This isn't going to be hard for the electorate to understand, and I don't mean that in a rude tone of voice, but these are sidewalks. Let's get this done. Let's seize the moment with this November election and get everybody out there voting, and let's put it to rest once and for all. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay, hey, I'm Sandeep Modi at 2450 Cedar Lakes. I just got 2 points here. As you are talking about the August 7th meeting and the referendum language, I think you should be clear on maybe not misleading voters, because you have 3 streets potentially going to be on that language, but I heard council talking about just Lander. So let's just make sure if voters vote yes, they're going to get 3 streets, or they're just clear on what they're going to vote for. And then the second point is, I don't want to be critical, but the referendum idea came up how many meetings ago? And only because somebody put it on the agenda today, that I believe was the mayor, maybe, that it actually got momentum. So it disappoints me that we're backing up on this timeline, because council casually talks about a lot of things. This being super important, I just think it should have been, this ordinance language should have been drafted, weeks ago. So that's just my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Mr. Leskovic.
Richard Leskovic, 29579 Gates Mill Boulevard. A couple of comments. Although this ordinance language in a perfect world would have been done sooner, but we do not live in a perfect world. And I appreciate the fact that there was the sentiment for putting it on the ballot, that the mayor did take the initiative with the law director to put some language forward to get a reading on it, and that the council has come along with that, with the general idea. And the idea, yes, we can get it done by November if we really want to, and I believe that. So I also think, because this is going to be somewhat contentious, the best way is for it to be ballot and not for council to make the decision, because that day, all of the arguments about the nature of surveys, the nature of the council people, all of that stuff out of the picture, and brings it down to as minor as what do the people want. And so I think that's a great decision. I'd like to comment on the meeting room. I think, the current council chambers were built when there were a lot of horses in Pepper Pike. And the times have changed, and it's more than just having more room for people. The audio visuals in that meeting room are terrible by today's standards, no doubt about it. And clearly, the city has the funds to do the kind of thing. I mean, if we can spend $4 million on a trail, we can certainly spend a couple $100,000 on moving council chambers and be able to belong to an organization. We do all our meetings hybrid. Now, that involves some technology. Yeah, and involves some people with know-how. But everybody knows what's going on. Everybody can bring input. And in the present chambers, we can't. So it's more than about just having space. It's having usable space. and usable technology. So I would ask council to give that a serious look. Now again, we don't want to spend a fortune. We want to be prudent, but enough to do whatever is needed to do the job. And again, I thank you all very much for this evening.
Can I make
Thank
a
you, sir.
comment?
Sure.
If I had known I'll get all this mention and compliment, I would have retired much earlier.
Mr. Bartasavich.
Gerard Bartasavich, 29600 Shaker Boulevard.
But you want to come to the mic, please?
Not really.
Then we can hear you.
Gerard Bartasavich, 29600 Shaker Boulevard. As you know, I come to a lot of meetings, and I've heard the same stories over and over again. I'd really like to get the sidewalks moving. I love Shaker Boulevard. Talked to many of our Shaker Boulevard would like sidewalks. We have a lot of families coming into our community, and I think we should really push to accommodate these young families with children, so we don't have to get into SUVs to go somewhere else, as mentioned. I submitted to the council clerk a livability fact sheet on sidewalks from AARP and the Walkable and Livable Communities Institute. I think it's an excellent piece, and it answers a lot of questions that keeps being asked at these council meetings. It's actually excellent, and I hope all you council members would take a look at it. And I would also look if it could possibly be put on the website under the walkability conversation, so people can see it, and they won't have to continue to come here every council meeting and ask the same questions. I respectfully ask for that to be added to the meeting minutes too. Thank you.
Anyone else? We done? Good. All righty. Thank you, everyone, for being here this evening. We stand adjourned.